All right, Maria, welcome back to Mea Culpa. So much going on. It's almost like we can't get away from this fire hose of chaos. I want to start by asking you, how the hell can 55%, I mean it, when I saw this poll, 55% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents still trust Trump when every single poll out there shows that he is underwater with everyone else? What fantasy land are they actually living in?
I think those are the people, Michael. First of all, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be back on Mea Culpa. Those are the people, Michael, that are close to immovable. That is part of sort of the cultish section of voters who voted for Trump in November. But what I'm seeing is, and where I think Donald Trump and the administration need to be very concerned, are the other folks, because it's the other folks, the real independents, even the Biden voters who voted for Biden in 20 and for Trump in 2024, that are leaving him in droves, because they are the ones who actually put him in office, right? And they are the ones who are now, and it's frustrating for us who were like screaming from the rooftops about how we knew all of this shit was going to happen, right? But that's fine. They are now seeing it for themselves, and they are scared, and they are frustrated, and they feel betrayed. And they should feel betrayed, because on the number one issue that Donald Trump promised voters that he was going to fix the economy, bring down prices, bring down costs, he has done exactly the opposite. And that's why his numbers are spiraling. When he is underwater on every single issue, including the economy, which he won on, and including immigration, which has been a key issue of strength for Republicans, Americans are now seeing that this is an administration, frankly, a regime that is obsessed with taking away people's rights, even the rights of American citizens, as they have deported American citizen children without any due process. And that is going to continue to hurt him with those key voters that are the ones that put him in office.
I want to be clear about something that I say all the time, knowing Trump better than anybody else that's out there. I don't give a shit. MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, they can have even fucking Lara Trump come out there. I know Trump better than Lara. And I'm telling you, do not, under any circumstance, ever underestimate the man's, the man when it comes to especially winning. All right. There is no depth that he will not go to in order to win. And so while we're watching as all of these different metrics, as you said, economy, immigration, you have, even Second Amendment legislation. Right. He's, when it comes to foreign affairs, it comes to, you name it, he's underwater on basically everything. Still, if you underestimate his desire to remain in power, to win, like the Democrats made the mistake, all right, in 2024, we will lose. Yeah. And you say, how is that possible? And I say, how the fuck is it possible that 55% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents still believe that Trump is going to do a great job at the end of this 4-year term? I'm lost.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, Michael, which is that this man, under any circumstances, and the acolytes around him cannot be trusted. And I think that's a really important point, because so many of the voters that voted for him in 2024 that are not MAGA voters, that are not, part of this cultage percentage that I'm talking about, I think did take him at his word when he was talking about how he wanted to fix the economy, because they heard all of the other stuff, right? But what they gave him credit on was like, well, I don't believe that about him. That's not going to happen. And I'll give you some very specific examples, right? Latinos who trusted Trump on the economy And then when it was pointed out to them, well, aren't you concerned about how xenophobic he is, about how much how much anti-immigrant policy he wants to implement? He separated families in 2018. Aren't you afraid of what he would do this time around? No, because I'm a citizen. I pay my taxes. I'm not a criminal. He's not going to go after my family. And now you have images of those same exact voters whose families are being ripped apart and whose families are being deported for simply being here without documents. And they are begging Trump to try to do something for them. And they are saying, I didn't think he was going to come after my family. And so all of those images of the trust factor, and I'm with you. I don't understand why even in 2024 they trusted him to do anything that came out of his mouth, because we all know that he lies.
Sure. So let me ask it to you this way then, because we're talking about a man who is underwater on honesty, on temperament, on foreign policy, on the economy, on basically every damn thing. So my question to you is this support delusion? Is it denial? Or is it just a flat out cult behavior?
Well, I think it is cult behavior for a certain percentage of folks who will never move no matter what. I think it was a little bit of desperation on behalf of the others who, frankly, Democrats didn't do a good enough job of convincing them that Democrats were on the trajectory to fixing the economy. The other side did a brilliant job of painting Democrats with all of these other extracurricular issues like transgender rights and, gender issues that stuck with us with way too many voters. And they were convinced, this other group of voters that put him in office, that Democrats were too focused on wokeness, on saying and doing the right thing, on, not being offensive to people. And frankly, Joe Biden as well. They saw Joe Biden as weak. They saw Donald Trump as strong. And I think it came down to something that guttural, that simple: strength versus weakness. But now it's come down to the lives and livelihoods of their own families. And they are seeing Donald Trump making decisions that he didn't need to make, right? The decisions on the tariffs, the decisions on massive deportation. He could have stuck to deporting undocumented criminal immigrants, right? We all support that. But he's gone way beyond that. And so I think this is now where you are seeing people's eyes are opening and understanding that perhaps their trust was misplaced. And I think Democrats have a huge opportunity to really pounce on that.
Well, they need to pounce on it, and they need to pounce on it in an intelligent way. For me, again, knowing Donald as well as I do and is spending as much time as I have with him, I'm always just befuddled, literally befuddled. This is not the man who I knew in 2005 all the way through 2018. This is not a guy who, he believed in tariffs. Yes, he believed in borders and so on. But then again, so do you. So do I. Not the tariffs, the borders. It was actually, I was there in the office. I remember when somebody said to him, and I remember having to repeat it to him, that a country without borders, quite frankly, isn't a country. And that's true. And, my wife is from Ukraine. My father was from Poland. My grandma from Argentina. I mean, we're from all over the entire globe, but they came in legally, right? And that's all that we want is legal immigration. Somewhere along the line, somebody breathed some bullshit into his ear. And it's always been known, and it's well documented, that the last person who has Trump's ear controls the brain. Why he is allowing these people to fuck up whatever legacy that he would have been able to create for himself? I don't know. This is not the man who ever would have allowed that to happen. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was because if I saw somebody like a Stephen Miller coming in there with a trajectory to destroy this man's legacy, his name. Don't forget, you don't just have Donald Trump. You have Donald J. Trump Jr. You have Donald J. Trump III. You know, how would you like to be John Wilkes Booth III? Right? I mean, that's how more than 50% of this country see Donald Trump as like this hated name. And yet you got a grandson, who is your namesake. I would never have allowed somebody like a Stephen Miller or any of these enablers to accomplish the things that they're doing. And that part bothers me because I want my president to succeed. I hear this from so many people that, I hope he fails. I hope he does this. I hope no, even if I voted or I didn't vote for the person, I want my president to succeed. Because if the president succeeds, you expect the country will succeed. We will be on a trajectory of right. We have gone literally off the deep end, jumping off the cliff for no reason at all.
No, that's exactly right, Michael. And at the end of the year last year, I was looking at the economy and it was going gangbusters. And I was thinking to myself, this magnificent bastard is going to be handed a fantastic economy and he's going to run with it, right? And of course, politically, I was like, oh, damn him. But from a livelihood personal standpoint, I was like, yes, my 401k is flourishing. We're going to do great. I'm going to be able to send my daughter to college. No problem, right? I was happy. But then the reality hit that this is not somebody who really understands economics. And to your point about him listening to the last person that leaves the room and how sadly on immigration that has been Stephen Miller, I have said this before. In 2018, and you might remember this, he was on the verge of coming to a deal with the Democrats. There was Schumer in his office and Pelosi in his office, and Schumer had offered $25 billion to build the wall in exchange for Donald Trump agreeing to give DACA kids a pathway to citizenship. That was on the verge of happening, Michael. If he had done that, he would have been a transformational president on immigration. And all of us immigration activists would have hailed that. And what happened? As soon as Schumer and Pelosi left, Stephen Miller walked in and he said, don't you dare do this deal because your MAGA base will leave you. And that's what he listened to. And then it was all blown up. So to your point, he absolutely had the opportunity, frankly, still has the opportunity. It's only been 100 days. They've been 100 days of historic debacle. And it's been the worst 100 days in history of a president of the United States. But he still has time to fix it. Will he? I doubt it. But let's hope.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not a big fan of hope. I'd rather be optimistic than hopeful in this case. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, though. How much of this blind loyalty is about fear? Fear of being cast out of the tribe if they admit that Trump is a failure. I mean, to sit and to listen as we see the chaos, this fire hose of chaos, of insanity every single day, waking up to it. But God forbid any one of these enablers, these cabinet members, these sycophants say a single thing, not just that is negative to Trump, but just disagrees because they have supposedly requisite knowledge, they would be cast out of the tribe.
Along with all of the people that Donald Trump has deported, he's also deported the backbones and the cojones of every single Republican in the Senate, in the House, and in his cabinet. And you can see like what is so painful to watch, and there's a ton of this on the internet, I'm sure you've seen this, the side-by-side comparisons of things that people like Marco Rubio have said about Ukraine before versus what he is saying about Ukraine now, and is literally night and day. And I don't know how Marco Rubio looks at himself in the mirror every night, how he looks at his kids with any semblance of self-respect, because to your point, they are giving everything up. They are selling their souls to and genuflecting at the altar of Donald Trump simply to stay on his good side, simply to be seen as part of, I don't know what kind of administration, because they
part of the team. You got to be part of the team.
But again, but to your point, Michael, to what end? If this team is going down in flames from a political standpoint, then to what end?
So what if hypothetically you and I and 70% of America believes that he is fucking up this country right now, and this administration is absolutely off the right path? What if, though, your denominator is not the 100%, where it's 70% that are against it and 30% that are for him, and your denominator is solely surrounded by the 30%? That 30% becomes your 100%, and they are living in a bubble of bullshit. Yeah. It's a bubble of bullshit that the only way to show them that what they are doing is wrong is you got to start voting these assholes right out of office, from the lowest level all the way to the highest level. I'm talking about from city council members that keep spewing this Trump horse shit all the way up to the presidency himself coming up in the 2028 election, right? I mean, that's the only thing that we can do in order to show, because I want to bring in this point. Just imagine if Biden had numbers like this. No, seriously. Goodness. Like if Biden numbers like this, Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, even ABC, NBC, everybody would have him declared clinically dead.
Yeah.
So the question I really want to ask you, so I want to ask you, why is the media still treating Trump like a legitimate political, maven, when technically he is a political corpse as well?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he still is the president of the United States. A lot of it has to do with, a lot of the corporate media ownership, which we have seen is, kowtowing to Trump. But there are still some really good reporters out there that, regardless of what happens, they point out all of the deficiencies in Trump's argument. They point out the falsities, the lies, the misinformation, the gaslighting, which I think is really important. A lot of reporters on CNN are doing that. A lot of reporters on MSNBC are doing that. You even have some reporters on Fox News, frankly, that are doing that now. And so I think we have to continue, though, Michael, and I know that you're doing so much on your podcast, on Substack. I'm now on Substack. This independent rise of the media also in voices is really important for everyone to understand that it's more than just what is being reported in newspapers and on the air. It's actually what's going on in these states. And to your point, it's going to be all about the elections. It's going to be all about what voters, everyday voters, do now. They do have power. And this, I think, is a really important point for us to make, Michael, because so many people, and I'm sure you talk to them every day, I talk to them every day, are feeling hopeless and helpless. They feel like, what can they do in the face of this onslaught of horrific tariffs, of prices that are continuing to rise, of mortgage rates rising, of their nest eggs disappearing, of the cost of eggs going up. they can vote. Their vote is going to be the most powerful weapon against this buffoonery that they can use to say no mas, to say enough. And it's already happening. We've seen most of the special elections, Democrats are either winning or they're overperforming. And that is going to lead to what I believe is going to be a takeover, certainly of the House of Representatives by Democrats in 2026, and possibly even the Senate. We have a very difficult Senate map, but I think that's doable too. But that's not enough. To your point, it's got to be members of city councils. It has to be school board members, Michael. You know that at the school board is one of the places where MAGA has weaponized the culture wars. That is also, you're seeing places where Democrats are starting to run and I saw it in Arlington. One of my dear friends, Soraya Tapia, was just voted to the school board in Arlington, and she is fighting this battle every single day against book banning, against, DEI, which again is laughable that their war against DEI versus somebody as incompetent and as stupid as Pete Hegseth gets to be Secretary of Defense. I mean, give me a freaking break.
I think we're in some really serious trouble when you have folks like Carolyn Levitt, who basically ducks any basic fact-checking questions. Everything is technically written for her, memorized it. She's great at the anger and the fury and the defense of Trump. I know what it's like. When we start talking about, for example, you're saying that even some of the reporters at Fox News are doing like a Peter Doocy. He asks some really great questions, like some real whoppers, You ever tried launching a podcast with zero experience? Well, let me tell you, it's like being tossed into a cage match with a grizzly bear, blindfolded, wearing clown shoes. I mean, when I started Mea Culpa, I thought to myself, come on, how hard can this be? Well, script writing, logos, production schedules, ad deals, and don't even get me started on the tech setup. I mean, I felt like I was decoding the damn Matrix. If only I had Shopify when I launched this beast. Shopify is the platform behind millions of businesses across the globe, responsible for a whopping 10%. You hear me? 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. And my friends, that's not hype. That's a fact. From big names like Mattel and Gymshark to folks just getting their hustle off the ground, Shopify's got their back. I mean, you want a gorgeous online store? Shopify's got hundreds of sleek, ready-to-go templates that make you look like a design god. And AI tools? Yeah, they've got those too. Writing your product descriptions, jazzing up your images, maybe even making you sound smarter than you actually are. I mean, not naming names or anything, right? I mean, need a marketing squad? Shopify's built-in tools let you hit email, Instagram, TikTok, wherever your customers are scrolling or doom scrolling. And listen, Shopify handles it all. Inventory, returns, international shipping. I mean, they are the ride or die business partner that you never knew that you needed. So if you got a big idea or even a little one and you're ready to turn that dream into a reality, head over to shopify.com/Cohen. So if you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify and sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Cohen. That's Shopify, SHOPIFY.com/Cohen. One more time, that's shopify.com/Cohen. The problem, though, is that he gets a response which is completely fabricated. Yeah. It's misinformation, it's disinformation, it's malinformation coming from the top, coming right out of Trump's office, right? So the question I'm really pondering all the time is how the fuck are Americans supposed to know what's true and then what's propaganda? Because I can't tell you the number of people, and I'm not talking about, it's easy for us, for me, to say, well, they just MAGA. They're stupid. That's what Trump likes, the uneducated. I'm talking about highly educated
I
people
know.
who are so misinformed about what the reality is. If I hear one more Upper East Side asshole telling me, don't you worry, Trump got this tariff thing, everybody's coming to him. 200, he's had 200 countries come to him so far when there are only 195 countries in the whole world, right? But all 200 so far. The
Right.
problem is that the 17 biggest trading partners that we have all, there's no deal. There's no
Yeah.
6, 7, $9 trillion coming into America from pledges. I mean, all of this are lies, but yet you've got Caroline Levitt and others like Scott Bessent and whoever else is up there on the podium with her, just misinforming the public. What the
Yeah.
hell do we do?
Outright lying when she was asked about this whole Amazon move where apparently they were going to put on their products how much of the tariffs were to blame for the increase in products that customers were going to see. And that really pissed off Trump. It pissed off the press secretary. And then she went on to say, well, why didn't Amazon do that? Like they called it a hostile political move. And now we've seen Jeff Bezos is backing off of that, by the way. But what she said was just something that, and then it shouldn't have floored me. I should not have been surprised. But she talked about why wasn't it that Amazon did that during the Biden administration when Biden implemented policies that caused all of the, 40% increase in inflation. First of all, that's all complete lies. And anyone who says that, Michael, is either completely lying to the American people, A, or B, just does not understand basic economics and it's just not that smart. So we all know that when Biden became president, he faced the global pandemic of COVID-19 and implemented policies, frankly, that was able to stand up an economy during that global pandemic that made the United States, yes, there was some inflation, but it was because of what was going on globally. And the United States became the envy of the world from an economic standpoint.
Right. And let's also, by the way, let's remind our listeners that Biden inherited the COVID issue,
exactly.
the pandemic, from dear old Donald and his presidency.
Because he did not know how to handle a global pandemic. And he completely, dropped the ball. And it was one of the reasons why he lost the election, deservedly so. And so, but to your point, none of that comes out in these briefings. And it's even more concerning, Michael, because they are methodically kicking out media outlets that will tell the truth, like the AP, right? And that has stood up to them, right? Let's remind people that the AP, they've tried to kick them out of the White House briefing room because they refused to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And so, good for them. But it is a huge challenge for us, Michael. And what I would tell our listeners to do, frankly, both for themselves as well as for others, when they're in conversations with people who are dug in and believe every single word that comes out of Trump's mouth or out of the mouth of the administration, is to check it. It's easy to check it from one source, two sources, three sources, various sources. And it's not tough to find out what's actually true and what isn't.
Well, right. But convincing them that what's on Google, it's New York Times. New York Times is fake news. Washington Post is fake news. Wall Street Journal, whatever they read that does not comport with the answer that they want becomes to them fake news, to the extent that this entire White House press shop has now just technically become a MAGA echo chamber where truth just goes to die. And what I want to ask you is, how dangerous is this to our democracy?
It's incredibly dangerous, Michael, because as you were saying those words like MAGA run propaganda, this is what Russia does. This is what Venezuela does. This is what Cuba does. This is what North Korea does. This is what Iran does. China, this is what China does. What do all those countries have in common? They're not democracies. They don't care about freedom of the press. They don't care about people's right to have the truth told to them by their elected officials. Those are all autocracies. Those are all dictatorships. And that's exactly what Trump wants to turn the United States into. And one of the ways that they can do that, which is most dangerous, is by slowly taking away the rights of the fourth estate, the press, the freedom of the press, the freedom to actually check their leaders, to challenge them when they are telling lies and misinformation and disinformation and untruths and gaslighting the American people, the right of the American public to understand what their leaders are doing and why, right? Yep. They have to speak truth to power. And it's dangerous when the White House tries to cover things up, which they do on a daily basis. And it's dangerous when media companies kowtow to the pressure that the White House is putting on them.
But they're all doing that, whether it's the ABC payoff, whether it's CBS fighting, whether it's even the law firms that are doing it. What I see is a coordinated information blackout coming out of this White House press office. That's just really what it is. Mm-hmm. And when you have surrogates like Caroline Levitt or Bessent or Lutnick or Stephen Miller or Marco Rubio or any of these folks refusing to engage on the record, refusing to engage in truth, I think democracy at that point in time falls, especially because those right now who are trying to disseminate the truth either get banned from the Oval Office, from Air Force One, or from the briefing room, or they get investigated by the FBI, where you're starting to see now with Pam Bondi, for example, bringing actions against news outlets to the extent that journalists are going to be required to reveal their sources.
Yeah. It's incredibly scary and concerning, Michael. And I can't sit here and tell our viewers that are watching or listening right now that it's all going to be okay, because I don't know that it's all going to be okay. That is a scary situation that we are in, because it's not just that they're going after the journalists, they're going after judges, Michael.
Yep.
They are imprisoning judges for doing their job. And so when you go after the fourth estate and you go after one of the three equal branches of government, what's left, right?
Well, I'll tell you what's left. No, Maria,
them?
don't walk away from this. Right. Well, I'm going to tell you. I want to give you a quick one. When you say what's after, what's next? Us, the citizens. I fucking warned America on what they did to me, the unconstitutional remand.
You did.
When Judge Alvin K. Hellestein, 30-year sitting federal judge, turned around and said, I have never in my life seen retaliation against a U.S. citizen by the highest office, by the president, by the attorney general. So he goes, it is retaliation. And I said, if they could do it to me, they will do it to you. I am merely the litmus test. And I bring this up because everybody right now, they're all like, oh my God, how is this happening? You know, why is this happening? I fucking warned you this was going to happen again and again. And what did people do? You know, it's Michael Cohen. He was Trump's fixer. Fuck him and so on. And sometimes it's like, as I would like to say to the judge, the one that just got locked up because you know, she had a conflict with Trump, or the others that Trump is going to, from a part of me wants to say, fuck you. I warned you. You gave me the middle finger. Now it's your ass that's in the frying pan. All right? Good for you. Maybe next time you'll smarten up and you'll listen when somebody tells you facts, right? Because right now, the way I see it, our entire political system, which used to be rooted in accountability. I mean, for fuck's sake, even Richard Nixon took questions. We don't get right now people, giving, these type of proper questions. They're all concerned about being booted from the Oval Office or the briefing room. We're getting performative rage. You get zero legitimate answers to any of the legitimate questions. The question I really want to ask you then is, where's the bottom to this barrel?
Again, Michael, it's going to depend on how much voters think is enough. Because, like you said at the very beginning of our conversation, we have the power to vote. And that's where we need to demonstrate that we're not going to take this. That's the only way. Because sadly, there is, I don't think, any other mechanism through which these people will stop. It's going to depend on us, on the people who are looking at this and who are saying, this is not the country that we grew up in. This is not the country that my parents brought our family to from Colombia when I was 2 years old. This is not the country that so many people love and cherish and hail as, the democratic shining city on a hill, like Ronald Reagan described it. That light is being slowly and methodically put out by this administration. And it's going to be up to the voters to do their thing. What's really scary, though, Michael, and you've seen this too, is that the president and the administration know this. And so they are also methodically trying to make it that much harder for people to vote. And people need to be aware of this. And they need to say, no, we're not going to accept this. That's why I love that, Democrats are now starting to stand up. Activists have been standing up from day one. You have the ACLU, you have immigration activists standing up and marching and suing, right? Suing this administration. This administration has been stopped by the courts, which is now why you are seeing they are taking these horrific measures of trying to put judges in jail. But it is happening so much that I think, even though it's a slow trickle and it's a slow process to go through the courts, you even have the Supreme Court making judgments coming down against this administration. And so we have to keep that going. And then we have to understand our power to vote from the local level on up to the state level, on up to the national level, on up to the presidency in 4 years. But hopefully in 2 years, we will understand the importance of taking power out of the MAGA acolytes in Congress, both in the House and the Senate, and be able to put some kind of real check and balance on this power-hungry president who will stop at nothing to become the authoritarian leader that he wants.
Yeah. See, the way I see it that this entire crazy ecosystem, it's all intentional, everything that they're doing, and it's designed to confuse and to exhaust the American people so that we just stop even trying to figure out what the truth even is. I mean, look, let's talk about for a second, some of the biggest lies that are going on right now, the tariff lies. Trump is sitting there and he lies through his teeth about who's negotiating what. Meanwhile, our allies, while Trump is saying, I'm not going to tell you who invested. Parrots everything Trump says. I'm not going to tell you who we're speaking to. That's not proper, and so on. But we've spoken many times. Then you have, our allies are publicly calling bullshit on this. Our adversaries, like China, turn around and call bullshit on it. Their folks come out and say we're not speaking to them. And mind you, it's like 80% of all of the goods that Americans consume, because it's cheap, comes from China. So when you have your biggest trading partner turning around and calling bullshit on you, that's a problem.
Yeah.
How do you think that this plays internationally for our country?
Oh, this is one of the points that I continue to make every chance I get, which is we all see.
Why do you think I asked the question?
I love you, Michael. This president is ruining the brand of the United States of America. And I think we need to say that over and over and over and over again, because you know better than most that one of the things that Trump cares about the most is brand. Yep. And his ego and his image. Well, you know what, Donald Trump, you are ruining not just the image of the United States, but yours. You think people respect you? People don't respect you. People laugh at you behind your back, and then they manage you to your face. They tell you what you want to hear so they can manipulate you into doing what they want. That is not respect. That is somebody playing you to your face. And that is what's happening on the global stage. And then you have our allies, or once upon a time our allies,
right,
like Canada, who now has elected a liberal prime minister who is positioned and poised to, frankly, go to war with the United States. They're going to defend Canada to the utmost, as they should, because this president has tried to do nothing but belittle them, one of our most important trading partners, to make them look bad, to insult them, to make them look like, you know, weak and dawdling idiots. And they're not going to take it, nor should they.
No, there are maple syrup loving neighbors. There are cousins. In fact, my first cousins all live in Toronto. You know, technically I am Canadian. You know, when I was born, my father was a Canadian citizen. I mean, you know, this is nuts. This is nuts. These people, Canada, China, they're both saying, we can't take this guy seriously.
That's right.
That's what I heard out of Mark Carney's mouth. We can't take this guy seriously. Yep. So imagine, what does that do to America's standing, not just in global trade, but how about global diplomacy, which is the most important. It's even more important than trade. Our national security, our safety. You know, here's something that most Americans don't think of before you close your eyes. When you hit the light switch to go to bed, right? You don't think, am I going to wake up tomorrow? Are there going to be planes and bombs and bad shit happening to me when I'm off at the office or my kid's off in school? Do I have to worry about an attack on America? Our allies, our closest allies, are all looking at us as irresponsible, as being unreliable. There is nothing worse in diplomacy than being cast as unreliable.
And God forbid that we will ever need any of them, and we might very well be in that position. They're going to say, fuck you. That's what they're going to say to the United States of America. And because of everything that Donald Trump has done, we will have deserved it. And this is what I think is one of the most dangerous outcomes of this administration, of this regime, frankly.
This episode of Mea Culpa is brought to you by Graza, my new favorite olive oil. It's fresh, it's never blended, and it comes from a single type of olive, the Picual, straight out of high-end Spain, where over half of the world's olive oil is produced. So why Graza? Single origin goodness, that's why. Only one olive from one region. No mysterious blends. That means a traceable, a fresher product without mixing in any low grade or unknown oils. It's super fun. It has squeeze and spray bottles too. So there's no more messy tins or drippy spouts. Just aim, squeeze, and go. I mean, there are three types for any task that you have. One, they have something called frizzle. That's their newest, with a higher 490-degree Fahrenheit smoke point, which is perfect for frying, crisping, or grilling. Sizzle at 410 degrees Fahrenheit, which is an everyday cooking oil for roasting, marinating, and sauteing. Then they have something called drizzle, which is a bold, a punchy finishing oil that you sprinkle on your salads, you dip your bread in, or even you top it off on your ice cream. Look, let me be clear. My daughter is the actual chef in the house, and she uses olive oil on everything from pastas to preparing steak. I mean, not only does this cook well, it smells delicious. Plus, as a healthy eater, Graza's extra virgin oils, they are loaded with those heart and brain friendly polyphenols. So it's good for you. Look, so here's what you get. You get 10% off your first order on Graza's site. But I personally suggest grabbing the trio. That's all the three squeezy bottles, the sizzle, the frizzle, and the drizzle, so that you're set for every style of cooking. So head right now to graza.co and use code Cohen to get 10% off of Trio, which includes, again, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle, and get to cooking your next chef quality meal. Again, head to Graza, graza.co, and use code Cohen, Cohen, to get 10% off the Trio. And I love saying it, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle. So get cooking now.
Is that they have turned our allies into adversaries, possibly enemies, and they have cuddled up to our adversaries, the people that we know Donald Trump either admires or, frankly, they might have something on him, which is why he kowtows to them. You know, Putin, I'm talking to you.
No, it's not true. They don't.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, then he just
admires. He admires that.
Exactly. It's pure, unadulterated admiration, right? For somebody who is a dictator, for somebody who can squash their opposition, for somebody who can destroy freedom of the press and put their opponents in jail. That's worse, because that's exactly the kind of behavior that Donald Trump admires. That's exactly
what Trump did. I keep trying to say he did it to me. I am the first political prisoner held by this country because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional rights. And we are seeing Trump and this administration trying to do it again and again and again now to the second, third, fourth, whether it's judges or whether it's reporters or whether it's just legal migrants that came here, or even U.S. citizens that are perceived to be illegal.
This is one of the things that I want to mention before we have to go for our audiences, because this is so important. So on the issue of immigration, we started out about how he's underwater on so many of the key issues, but on the one issue that they sort of hailed as a strength for them, they are now underwater, and it's because Americans understand that if due process and constitutional rights can be destroyed and taken away from somebody like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was the undocumented immigrant who was deported to El Salvador, and even the Supreme Court has said that it was not done correctly, you need to bring him back. They're ignoring the Supreme Court, which is one of the messes that we're in. But now we see a story where there is a family, this has happened twice, a mother with a 2-year-old U.S. citizen child. She is undocumented. She wanted her child to stay in the United States. And then you have a family where the mother had 3 children, one of which had cancer and was going through treatments, and she wanted her child to stay in the United States. The administration rolled over those rights, didn't give them a chance to even talk to a lawyer when the dad, who is here, had his lawyer call the Department of Homeland Security. They had already deported his child. So the constitutional rights of these U.S. citizen children were completely mowed down, completely taken away. And these kids have now been deported without any due process, without any legal counsel, without any hearing in court whatsoever, without even the ability of the moms being able to say, this is a situation that my U.S. citizen children are in.
Mm-hmm.
This should be, again, so scary.
It's a no-brainer.
Yes, exactly. And I know you are, Michael, you are the original cautionary tale. And sadly, way too little, percentage of people took that seriously. And so I'm so glad that you continue to speak out, because you are the poster child of what can happen. And now we're seeing it happen to a ton of other people, and it will continue to happen to a ton of other people, U.S. citizens, as well as others who are here legally, until Americans speak out with their vote and say, no freaking way.
Yeah, no mas. Exactly. No Maria, when I said before, I blame the media, and it's why I'm so thankful for groups like Midas Touch, who I've been involved with now for 5 years, #1 independent news station, or Substack, where we're both growing leaps and bounds and so on. Why I am so disenchanted with media, because the media, they're so freaking quick to try to polish Trump's image every single time that he pretends to act in a way that somebody deems presidential. Let me just give you an example. And I couldn't believe it. How stupid is this country when Trump meets with Zelensky at the funeral of St. Francis in the Basilica? The two of them are sitting there on metal chairs across from each other, right? This is after years of Trump trying to shake Zelensky down like a mob boss. Now, all of a sudden, because the two of them, there's a fucking photograph of them slumped over, Trump slumped over in the chair, Zelensky sitting upright, talking, engaging. We're supposed to now pretend that this is some big diplomatic breakthrough. If I listened to one more asshole, I had to stop. I'm not joking. I literally had to stop watching the news because it infuriated me. I started watching Storage Wars, Neighborhood Wars, anything else that I could watch. I started watching my Netflix shows, anything other than to watch this bullshit, this attempt to polish Trump's image. Let me be clear. There is no breakthrough here because Zelensky was asked to sit down by Trump, and that they had a 15-minute conversation during a funeral of the Pope.
A 15-minute impromptu pull aside does not diplomacy make.
No.
And there's going to be no breakthroughs. There's going to be no new initiatives that are announced. This is yet another one of those broken promises on behalf of Donald Trump, who, as you remember, said, I can solve the Russia-Ukraine war on day one. Well, he's been a huge failure in that. And he continues, as you know, to try to blame Ukraine, who's nothing but a victim here, in what has been an egregious, criminal, horrific attempt to take over a whole country on behalf of Putin. And here's another point that I want to make that I think is really important. And I love when, and CNN does this a lot, they run the comments that Rubio made when he was making the case for Ukraine, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as opposed to what he's saying now. And I think it's important for us to remember those comments. The comments are that after 1991, right, after the wars, Ukraine was asked to, after the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine was asked by the United States and Russia to give up its nuclear weapons. And in return, they would get protection from the United States and from Russia. Ukraine, to its credit, said, okay. They handed over all of their nuclear weapons and said, we trust you to protect us when and if needed. And, roll the tape fast forward. who's the ones that are now attacking Ukraine, betraying them to their face? It's Russia. And we can't forget that, because then, people so easily are like, well, why should we protect Ukraine? What have they done for us? People need to remember that history. They didn't have to give up those nuclear weapons. We all wanted, and we're on a path to try to diminish the nuclear weapons on the world stage, because we know that makes everyone less safe. Ukraine did its part because we asked them to. We owe them now. And that's why the vast majority of Americans still support, and frankly, if Republicans had a backbone, they would admit that too, that we need to help Ukraine defeat Russia, push them back, and have the sovereign country that they are, that they deserve to have.
Yeah. So look, the hour goes by quickly, Maria.
Yeah.
I really have just one more question for you, and it's one that I'm hoping as an answer gives me some guidance. What do we tell Americans? Because you're on your Substack, I'm on Substack. I have a YouTube channel. I have my podcast, not just this, but my political beatdown. Our goal is to continue to get the message out, to build the community so big that our voices cannot be ignored. So what do we tell Americans who feel completely gaslit when the system keeps propping up a man whose only consistent skill is to burn the whole thing down anyway?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Michael. And I think the answer is that people need to use their voice. And today, to your point, there are so many options to do that. They can even start their own Substack, right? There have been people on Substack, on social media, who have gotten, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers when they were no one, right? This can happen to anybody. If you have something to say, you should have the opportunity. There's so many mediums out there to say it, or chime in with us. Follow Michael, follow me, follow Midas Touch. There are a ton of outlets out there and people who are talking about what we are up against every single minute of every day. And the more that are out there talking that way and supporting the people who are, talking truth to power, the better off we're all going to be. So that's voice. Secondly, and we've mentioned it several times, but we can't mention it enough, is vote. We need to understand the power of our vote. Our vote when special elections come along, our vote when local elections come along. It is one of the most important weapons that the American public has to make sure that their leaders are doing right by the country, our democracy, our families, our livelihoods. And then thirdly, I would say, your vote is kind of the culmination, but it's not just that, and it's not just the voice, but activate yourself. There are events at all local levels these days, from meetings in people's living rooms to marches in local parks to national marches where people are taking to the streets, to sit-ins. We saw members of Congress on the Democratic side who were like, we need to do something. These Republicans are not including Democrats in, legislation for the economy, and they're going to make their voices heard. So Americans are not helpless. And so therefore, we shouldn't be hopeless. We need to use our voices. We need to use our votes. We need to use our legs and our arms and our fingers to be able to include ourselves in physical events, in virtual events, in any single type of event that allows us to show up and to participate in what is still a democracy, but we need to fight for that democracy if we want to continue to have it when our children are grown.
Amen to that. Maria Cardona, thank you, my love. Appreciate you so much. Appreciate your insight and your perspective. It's an answer.
Gracias, Michael.
It's certainly
Thank you,
an
my
answer.
friend. I appreciate it.
Oh, always, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Adios. Ciao, ciao.